Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Adding Emails to Microsoft Teams Conversations, the next step in your remote working journey. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You are welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. We'll also make a recording of this webcast available to you within a couple of days. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, David Lavender, Harmony Chief Product Officer. David has served as an executive in enterprise software, mobile, security, and network companies. David is an international scholar for the Society for the History of Technology, a founding member of the Humanizing the Digital Workplace Consortium, and a longtime contributor to CMS Wire. David, please.
Thanks, Maya. Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Adding Emails to Microsoft Team Conversations, the next step in your remote working journey. So unless you've been living under a rock for the last 6 months, I'm sure that everyone has seen the meteoric rise of Microsoft Teams. A lot of it was, we hear a lot of folks saying that they were planning on moving to Teams, but they moved a lot quicker considering the recent global lockdown and a lot of people working remote, working from home and needing to be able to communicate. In April, Microsoft released numbers saying that they saw more than 200 million Microsoft Team meeting participants per day, 75 million daily active users. And I'm sure by today, that's much higher. And while it's very difficult to decipher the usage numbers that Microsoft puts out, what is interesting is to take a look at what people are doing with Teams. So before we start to talk about that, maybe we'll do a quick poll to see what the participants in today's webinar are doing with their Teams implementation. So Maya, why don't you take it away?
What do you use Teams for? You can select multiple answers: meetings, video conferencing, or calls, chat, native document sharing with SharePoint or OneDrive, connectors or integration with other apps, or we don't use Teams. We're waiting a few seconds until everyone answers. Okay, let's see the results.
Okay, well, I don't ever remember a poll where we had 100% of participants give us the answer to the same answer to everything, but 100% of folks on today's webinar said they're using Teams for meetings and video conferencing, which totally fits in with Microsoft's numbers here, that they are highlighting the fact that they're using so many minutes for meetings and there's so many daily active users, because this is the functionality that ties people together, brings people who are working remotely together so that they can work in a fashion and be able to communicate in real time. That's why 75% are also using chat. So that's another way to collaborate in real time together. And a lot fewer are using document sharing with SharePoint, and a lot fewer than that are using integration with other apps. Interesting to note, so nobody on this call is not using Teams, so I think we have the right audience that we're speaking to today in terms of what the next step in their should be. So it kind of looks like the first step is everyone's using meetings, then chat, and then really the next step is what comes after that. So let's just have a brief moment about talking about chat. So everybody's using meetings. A lot of folks have moved over, even those who were using Skype before have now moved over to Teams, and that seems like a no-brainer to be able to communicate in real time. Now, chat is kind of an interesting element to Teams because we already have a communications channel, which is email, and yet we have another communications channel now being introduced, which is chat. So we do see about 3/4 of the people on the webinar using chat, and it's easy to understand why. It's pretty much real time, people working together, instantaneous answers. It's really very convenient. and particularly convenient for internal communications. Now, we know that there is the opportunity to be able to use chat externally and have external users, but for the most part, in the enterprise arena, Teams chat is most useful and most used for internal communications, and that's really good. When it comes to adding remote external users, then it becomes a little bit more challenging. So that's great. We've got lots of people now who were not using meetings and chat are doing it now with Teams, and so that's why Teams has soared in usage everywhere, pretty much globally, and we're seeing such a high degree of usage. But working remotely, there's other things that are involved with work just besides meetings and chat. And the idea of Teams is really to be a collaboration platform that allows us to work together seamlessly through a variety of different types of artifacts and different types of events. So, for example, working with documents, working together on tasks, synchronizing tasks, working together with projects, working together in other apps and synchronizing the communications together with those Teams. Now, we do see some people using already native document sharing on today's call who said that they've already started doing that, and that's great. But when we start talking about taking this up a level beyond just simple communication with people, when we're talking about how do we fulfill business processes and how do we work with customers, that's when we take it up a level. We have to take kind of a broader look at what we're doing with Teams and how we can get more productivity out of it using some of the other Microsoft tools that we already have in our toolbox. One main concern I think that people have today is how do you communicate with people outside your company? So as I said, Teams is great. For meetings, absolutely no problem, easy to add people to Teams meetings. For chat, it's a little bit more complex. So for example, when you're working with customers or partners or suppliers, yes, it is possible to add these folks as guests to your network and to be able to communicate with them also through chat. However, the big challenge here is that when you're working together, say with a customer, and you're exchanging proposals, contracts, documents that are more of have somewhat of a legal nature to them, at the end of the day, when you sever contact with that particular party, there's a big issue of where the documents and all the information, all the emails reside afterwards. So if you're in a guest situation, once that relationship is severed, the main repository of all that information stays with the company that whose tenant was being used for all the communication, and that's where it becomes a problem to rely solely on Teams as a collaboration platform when working with outside people. And most business processes at the end of the day involve some people outside the company, whether it's customers, suppliers, partners, any other type of outside party that you may be working with. So maybe before we go on and talk about how we address this and how we can get some more value out of Teams, let's take another poll and see how strong this trend is, how many people are actually, people are communicating with folks outside their organization.
Okay, so how do you communicate with external parties like customers, suppliers, or partners? Please select all that apply. Email, Teams chat, via guest accounts, Slack, or other app.
Okay, maybe another moment. Okay. Okay, so I think we're good. So the results we see here, no surprise, the email is almost universally used with communicating outside organization. In addition, it looks like some folks are doing both, using Teams chat with guest accounts and continuing to use email, or using about a third are using some other app as well. So this is no surprise. This really goes along with, I think, what we're seeing everywhere in the world, is that email continues to be a dominant communications modality when working with people outside the company. And here now we have a challenge, because the challenge is that if you're using email to communicate outside the organization and you're using team chat to communicate inside the organization, now you start to have somewhat of a disconnected business conversation. So let me give you an example. Say you're having in a Teams conversation and someone says, hey, what happened to that proposal that the customer sent us? Well, now you have to go out of Teams, go to email, find the email, and now you start to have to figure out where the information is being stored. So disconnected business conversations is a big concern as we move more and more to using Teams. And the idea is that we really want to create a single conversation, a single place to go to have our discussions, while continuing to get the best value out of both, using email externally, using Teams internally, and being able to tie those two together. So that's a challenge, and that's one we're going to be addressing today. And I'll show you a very quick demo of how we believe we can bridge this gap quite simply using the Microsoft tools you already have today. The second challenge, and this is more related less to the technology and more to the business environment that we live in today, and that is people need to be self-sufficient. As we've moved to a lockdown and many people have gone to be working from home or working remotely, the people need to be self-sufficient. There's less places to go to get information. If you used to be able to just walk over to somebody else's desk and ask them how to do something, or get somebody from the IT desk to come up and take a look and see what's happening. And today that's a lot more difficult. So things have to be much more simple. And Teams being able to bring in meetings, to be able to talk to people almost virtually face-to-face and to chat with them, that's wonderful. But tying all this information together, you can't really rely on a complicated process or expect people to be able to find information when it's spread across different locations. So the reality is that you still need email, even if you're working with Teams. If you're working with suppliers, you're working with customers, if you're doing account management, you're doing project management, anytime you're working with outside people, you're going to have emails that are of a legal nature. They might be document attachments as well, but certainly emails. Somebody sends you a proposal through email, somebody sends you a contract through email, somebody replies to a question about delivery times, pricing, support, service questions. All these types of things are types of emails and documents that people need to retain for periods of time. So as you continue to work, there has to be a way to reconcile Outlook and Teams in a way that doesn't interfere with the end user, the typical business user who really doesn't care about governance or compliance or where this information is stored or how everything is done. What they're really interested in is just being able to work and to have that information at the tip of the fingers when they're outreaching to people and they're communicating locally with colleagues. So the way we have to do this is really, if we looked at the two challenges, one was disconnected conversations and people being self-sufficient. The answer to this is that there's really two pieces to the solution. One is you just have to make the right thing the easy thing to do. So if you want people to be able to find information, just make it intuitive. So you don't have to go through training. You don't have to make it so that they have to ask other people for help. Just make it super, super simple so that they know what to do without having to go elsewhere looking for help. Second piece is to create that single coherent discussion. So instead of having to split the discussion between email and Teams, how do you communicate and have all pieces for that discussion in a single place? So more and more, as you start to discuss internally different business processes, it seems like the right thing to do is to take the emails that are of interest and to bring those into the Teams conversation. So customer asks, you're having an internal discussion and someone said, hey, what happened to that proposal that we got from so-and-so? It would just be easy to say into the discussion, oh, here's the email, and here are some of those documents that were attached to the email, and continue the conversation in a single place, yet retaining those emails in Outlook so that you have them for compliance and governance purposes. From the end user, it's a smooth user experience. From the organizational perspective, all the legal and compliance requirements are maintained. And that's really the challenge, is how to do that. So the question is, how do you make this easy? If you want to do this out of the box, adding an email to a conversation is not so easy. And to toggle between the two applications, start looking for information is quite complex. So that's really the challenge here. So there's really a couple things you need to do. One is you need to provide a solution in people's comfort zone. So today, as much as people are using Teams, as we saw, it's mostly for meetings and somewhat for chat, but everybody's still using email. So you have to make people feel comfortable. The way to do that is to allow people to move emails, important emails, from Outlook into Teams super simply without having to figure out how to do that. Trying to change user behavior and giving them new types of requirements and new types of flows and business processes isn't going to work. People are just going to ignore it because they're stressed out as enough working at home, and they don't need new things to learn. So the way to do that is to just make it easy to include emails. Make it possible to drag and drop emails directly into Teams conversations and then continue the conversation from there, so that at the end of the day, you can have that one coherent conversation in one place in the Teams channel where you're already having the conversation with internal folks. So I'm going to show you the Harmony Smart Assistant. I'm going to show you a very quick demo of how Harmony has implemented this really simply to make it very easy for your users to be able to quickly add emails and attachments to Teams conversations and continue the conversation from there. So I'm going to just take a step here, and I'm going to switch over to my email window. This is, I'm sure, familiar to everybody on the call. This is my Outlook window, and I'm just looking at some emails. On the right side of the screen, I have my Harmony window, and this is a window that is a representation of, you'll see all my teams that I belong to. These are actually these are the teams I belong to and the groups that I belong to. But I can also take a look at my favorites, which I'll show in just a moment. But this also, for those of you who are existing Harmony customers, already know that we have full integration with SharePoint, and you can drag and drop emails to SharePoint, add metadata, and do all sorts of very nice and complex things for email management, records management, and so on. What I'd like to talk to today is not so much about some of the more sophisticated capabilities of Harmony, but just how you use Harmony in a very simple manner to get people to go to the next step of Teams usage. So they're using it for meetings, they're using it for chat. Let's get them to be able to integrate email conversations into the Teams conversations so that everything can be done in one place and people can get tremendous value out of Teams without having to add additional overhead. So basically the way this works, I'm looking at my favorites now, and you'll see that this is I pretty much have a hierarchical view of my different locations. And what I'm going to do is, the case here I'm looking at is you see that I have an email that contains a number of merger documents. And the situation here is one that I'm sure that many people are aware of. This is, I'm Annie in this case, Annie Tucker, and Annie Tucker is a account manager, and she's working on with a number of different clients, but she provides help with tax information to different business entities. And in this case, Sam, who works for a company called Glory, is one of the companies that is undergoing a merger. And he's actually asking Annie for help on how to structure the deal, his merger deal, so that he'll be able to take into account all the tax implications. So you see, he sent over an email with some questions and some underlying documents which are really important. And Annie right now is working on this discussion in her Teams channel. She has a Teams channel where she's discussing this internally, and now she's got this email, and she wants to include this email into the Teams conversation directly so that she can continue the conversation with all the internal colleagues. The alternative, of course, would be to forward this to all the people on her team, let them know that they've got an email, then go back into Teams, tell them I sent you an email, and again, everything is disconnected. It becomes very hard to follow and fraught with errors as people miss important information and don't see the latest versions of what's being worked on. So the way this works is really simple. What I can do is I just take the email, I highlight the email, and I just drag it across the screen onto the channel where I want the email, and in this case also the document attachments, to go. Okay, so I've already done this before, so it's going to ask me if I want to add this new one as a new version of the documents, and I'll just say yes. And those emails, now the email and the documents are being uploaded to the Teams location, and it'll also be available now. So now before I go to Teams to see this, it now asks me if I want to include a message to give some sort of context for why this email and the documents are shown in the Teams channel. So I'm going to say yes, and it also allows me, of course, to do at mentions. So I'm going to mention Fred, because Fred is someone who's really key on my team, and I want him to make sure that he sees this email. I'm going to ask for Fred, and I'm also going to ask for Harmon Young, also someone, and I'm going to say, please take a look at these critical merger documents and let me know what you think. And I'm going to post this. And when this message gets posted, meantime, it's being posted there, and then I can continue directly in Teams. So I click through on this, and I open Microsoft Teams. And what you'll see is I go right to my Teams, right to the channel where this is, and you can see that this is exactly the message that I just posted. Hi, Fred, Harmon. Please look at these merge items. Let me know what you think. So you see the email now is embedded right in the conversation we're having about the merger. For the folks who were in this conversation, they don't know that there's been someone's gone out to Outlook to bring things in. It's just a very smooth conversation that's taking place in a single place. But even more than that, it's not just that they see that I've posted something. These folks can actually click through on it. So, for example, if somebody wants to see this email, literally just click on the email and it opens it in place. So there's no need to have to go to another application. There's no need to have to open something else or lose context. I stay in context in Teams, and when I close it, I go right back to where I was. And the same is for the merger plan and the merger structure. Those also can be opened in context in place. And the beauty of this is that all the underlying, what happens to the documents, where are they stored, everything else is all handled behind the scenes. The end user, all they need to do is drag and drop, and all the information resides in a single place. It can't get any simpler than this. Now, just for those of you who are wondering what happens behind the scenes, if I go to the Files menu over here, you'll see that those documents, including the email messages and everything, are located now in the Files location for that channel, and they're available there, and that's their physical storage location. But from an end user perspective, for the typical business user who's working remotely from home, from their perspective, they see all this information in the conversation in a single place. And this is the tremendous value of moving to that next step with Teams, because as we start to use chat more and more, the idea of being able to bring in email conversations directly into this doesn't reduce the importance of email, but it does reduce the necessity to split a given conversation into two different places. It allows the people who are focused on the internal collaboration to continue to work in a single place. And for those folks who are working internally and externally, as they go to Outlook, as they go to their email window, they're able to bring things in without having to start sending lots of attachments and forwarding things to people in email. So just in summary, I just wanted to show that as a very quick demo. For those of you who do know Harmony and are familiar with the previous versions and all the things it can do, there's a lot more to the product. So the ability, I just showed a very simple drag and drop, but we also have the capability of adding metadata, including to Teams. We also have the ability when you drag emails over to capture the header information, so you have all the metadata automatically captured. We have the ability to add retention labels. so that people who need to have a much more rigorous collection of the emails and storage of emails, we have all that built in, and we have many customers who are using those capabilities. What we do see is a big shift in an opportunity here for people who are using Teams and who want to make more, take advantage more of Teams without losing some of the capabilities and the compliance and everything else that they already have in place. The next step to adding more value to remote workers is giving them the ability to move emails into Teams and to have a single conversation in a single place. We believe this is really the next big thing that's going to happen. We see it from the poll results that was really kind of the third item on the list. So we see that people are starting to move in that direction, but are not necessarily there yet. And Harmony believes that we have a central role and a key role in being able to facilitate this, because we know that the success of being able to take advantage of technology is not related to technology. It's related to the amount of behavioral change that you need to make to get people to work and do what's right. If we reduce the amount of work that's necessary for people to change, that they can just continue doing what they've already done and to make the right thing, the easy thing, we'll see an enormous uptick in terms of adoption. The uptick in adoption is a big benefit to end users because this allows them to be more productive. It's a big benefit to organization because it allows organizations to take advantage more of the Teams and everything that it brings into more real-time conversations, into more real-time collaboration, therefore helping people move their business initiatives and business success forward. It also, as we know, it helps people be more self-sufficient, which is people are really eager to be at this point because they know that they're stuck at home, and when something doesn't work, it's really frustrating. And not to be in that situation and to be where everything can work out of the gate is really something that is a high value, particularly in these times of lockdown and in remote working, which we know is going to continue for the foreseeable future. So to make this easy, what we do is we want to give you a chance to try it now. There's QR codes. We'll also be sending out this presentation a bit later so that you'll have these slides and also this contact information at your fingertips. But there's really two ways to get started. If you're an existing customer, I highly, highly recommend that you go and upload and update your what you're using to the latest version, which is Harmony 8.1.2, which has a lot of new capabilities. We've added some really nice new onboarding capabilities for end users to make it easy for them to get started. We've added some of the capabilities you saw here that I showed you about how to easily get conversations into Teams and also to post it to Teams, to navigate directly to the place in Teams where that conversation is taking place. You can go to the download area either through the QR code or through the link that's shown at the bottom of the screen. If you're not yet an existing Harmony customer, I suggest you try an enterprise trial. Here is also a QR code. You can get the full capabilities of the product for a limited time. There's also some help that you get in terms of walkthroughs and helping you get started in evaluation guides that can be made available. And it's very easy to just set up and get going out of the gate. So either way, we highly suggest and recommend that you try this now. It's very simple, and see for yourselves what value you can get out of this. Okay, so I'd like to thank you very much. And I know we have a number of questions that are here. So one question was, will there be a recording afterwards? The answer is yes, they'll be sent out later. Someone asked, how do I see Teams in my Harmony folder into Harmony? So there's a couple things here you need to do. One is you need to, first I have to make sure that you're using version 8 or higher. And I highly suggest, as I said, to use the latest version of Harmony. The second thing you need to do in order to be able to use Teams is to get admin consent. So one of the things that Microsoft requires when you want to bring information into Teams from an external app is you need to get the Teams administrator's consent. In the latest version, we've made this really simple to do. So if you don't know how to do that in previous versions, again, I recommend you download and install the latest version that will show you how to do that. Once you do that, you'll see the Teams will appear in the window together with all the SharePoint information on the side. Okay, so, were there any other questions that we had?
Yes. I'm using Harmony for SharePoint today. Is there an extra cost to add the team support?
No. If you own Harmony, this is included in your subscription.
Another question, do you support metadata in Teams like you do in SharePoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I showed today was how to make this very simple. So for the end user, if you don't want to necessarily complicate things by adding email to a conversation with metadata, but for organizations where email management and records management is important and you want to be able to classify information, if there's required metadata, when I drag the information across, you'll be prompted to supply it at that time. And it's basically, for the end users, very simple. There's nothing extra that they need to do. But for most cases, just the next step, we believe that a lot of people who don't have a requirement can get value as well just by dragging information over without the metadata.
Thanks, David. One last question. Can I upload multiple emails to Teams?
Yes, you can do multiple bulk uploads or possible. You can take as many emails or just the attachments without the emails, and you can upload those in bulk, as many as you want at a time. I do see one other question that just came in about, can Automate be used to push emails to Teams? I don't know the answer to that, but I will make sure that somebody follows up with the person who asked that question, and we'll give a specific answer.
Thank you, David, for a great presentation, and thank all of you for joining us today. You will receive an email with a link to view this webinar again within a couple of days, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Bye-bye.